morning, everybody. Just want to double check again, make sure those who just signed in, you have access. You guys can see what we have on our screen here.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So as a reminder, we are going to record this session. So for those who you think have interested partners or anybody else, we'll provide the link once we get the recording all squared away. So just as a heads up there. Allison, Rob, and I are here, and we're going to run through this. So thank you, everybody, for calling in and participating. I want to remind everybody, too, to mute their phones so we don't get any other feedback as we are recording. And then also, we're going to take questions at the end, so make sure you save those for the end. And I think the best way to go through this is either write it in that chat box there, or we can field them just directly on the call if you would like to ask and chime in there. It might be a little bit chaotic when that time comes, but we're very open and willing to answer any questions and have a discussion about this tool. If you are disconnected for some reason, please call right back in. That's fine. We'd love your participation. Just remember to, when that happens, to mute your phone as well. All right. So my name is Rhonda Sparks, and I'm based in Nome. I work for Defenders of Wildlife as the Arctic Community Liaison. And I want to provide a little bit of background here, and then we're going to go into a demonstration that Rob with Axiom will go through, and he'll drive, and we'll see what this tool can do. We've spent a long time working on this tool, and the team of experts here are Allison Dunbar and Ryan Covington out of the DC office for Defenders, Carla Dutton, Rob, and a few others here at Axiom. So it's a long time. It took a long time to kind of put this tool together, but we're very pleased to share it. Some of you may have already seen this demonstration. It's very similar to some of those in the past, but we have some really great oil spill scenarios we'd like to run through as well today. Some of my background, I've actually participated in some of the spill response exercises and drills that have occurred up in the Northwest Arctic area of Alaska, the Bering Strait area. We want to focus on this Bering Strait area because of its unique wildlife benefits, rich resources, the relationship there with all the communities, but also understanding the remoteness of that area. There's a lack of infrastructure to some extent, lack of understanding of spill response equipment, the process, what it takes to get prepared. The Bering Strait region is also a very unique than other regions in Alaska, as it is an unorganized borough infrastructure. And some of those of you who are Department of Interior and others know what some of those challenges bring as far as community engagement. We actually push the limits in community engagement and hope that a lot more agencies, federal, state, and agencies come to the communities to provide the information on spill response and preparedness. And so by kind of focusing on this area, we're taking advantage of some of the other existing meetings that are occurring through the federal, state, and agency processes for building the knowledge on spill response and education, preparedness, and what that takes. So this is definitely a result of a lot of those meetings that we've had in the background over the last couple of years. So as you all know, the Arctic is warming, and we're facing a lot of changes up in this part of Alaska with reduced sea ice, increased shipping, and with all that comes a lot more stress to the environment, right, and risks to impact. And so this is kind of the driver of why we're doing this work. Allison has been the primary lead for the Bering Strait Response Teaching Tool, and I'm integrating it into the communities. And so this is one facet of our work within Defenders that we're focusing on. As you also know, the Bering Strait is a narrow corridor that provides traffic for all these vessels, but also all the marine life, right? All the marine mammals, the seabirds, the fish, and things like that to transit up north. So there's a very high risk for potential impact to happen. And so we really want to build this knowledge base within the communities of what spill response is, what it could take, and how it works, and how it would integrate in these remote regions, but also understanding that the local community members are the knowledge holders of a lot of the habitat use of these resources. So where the species, their range, what the current situations are like, what the weather conditions are like, how to navigate and travel in this area. The community members are the ones that have that extreme, unique knowledge of the environment. And so what we're trying to do is bridge that with the spill response agencies and those who are going to come in a spill situation to minimize the impacts. And so this teaching tool is a really great mapping platform that helps us visualize the resources out there and understand and discuss what things we need to do to prepare for those events to minimize the time that contaminants in the environment. So with all that, I'd like to kind of just turn over to Rob here, and he's going to kind of go through the features of the tool. And like I said, feel free to ask any questions at the end. Anything else from Allison? Okay, go ahead, Rob.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rob Bohenik. I'm an information architect at Axiom Data Science, and I'm also the technical lead of the Alaska Ocean Observing System. And when Defenders of Wildlife approached us about 18 months ago about developing a Bering Strait response teaching tool, we at Axiom and at AUS thought it was a great opportunity to leverage a lot of the work that we've done managing scientific data and scientific data sets to kind of package these things into an application that can be used by spill responders and communities in northern Alaska. And so building upon a lot of the stuff that we've done for AUS over the last 10 years, we've been able to very cost effectively and efficiently build this portal. And so right now you're looking kind of at the Bering Strait Response Teaching Tool homepage. And the tool is actually composed of several components. One is a data catalog that lists all of the relevant data that we believe is useful in a spill response in this region. And then we have a data portal which actually allows us to integrate these various data sets along space and time. And one of the cool things about this project was we increased our ability at AUS to actually be able to run spill trajectories, node spill trajectories that are being powered by real ocean and weather conditions. So this was a great opportunity for us to really advance our capabilities and leverage a lot of the work that we've done up to this point. So to give you a little bit of an idea of what we've included in the Bering Strait Response tool, I'm going to show you a little bit of the data that's contained in the catalog. So up here you've got these navigational panes up here where this is the catalog, the portal, the 4 layers, and some settings. So if we go to the catalog, we get kind of a contemporary list of various data sources. So historical sensors, real-time sensors, biologically important areas, community database, a variety of resources from the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation, geographic response strategies, Alaska emergency towing systems, boundaries, DEMs and bathymetry, Alaska shore zone. So if we were to select one of these, for instance, we go down deeper and we access a metadata view that gives contextual information regarding this data set. And that allows the user to kind of explore all of the individual layers from the Alaska Shore Zone program and be able to visualize and interact with that data. We can also do things like searching. So if I type in National Weather Service, I can see here is that there's a sea ice forecast. So this is current sea ice conditions in northern Alaska reported last night from the sea ice desk at the National Weather Service. And so you can kind of interact and see what is the current conditions of the sea ice. This was published last night at midnight. We can rewind this to different time periods So we can see how sea ice changed over a day. You start to see how these are kind of changing. And then you could jump to different periods. So say if I wanted to go back to the July of 2016 and see what sea ice looked like in July of 2016, I could do that. And there's a whole variety of these types of data sets, everything describing sea ice to marine mammal utilization to ocean conditions and weather conditions, which can all be accessed via this catalog. And we have 43 different assets that we've included into this data set, into the Bering Sea Response Teaching Tool, excuse me. So let's go into the portal itself. So the portal is where we actually integrate multiple sources of information onto like a common map interface. And what we're looking at right now is a community data layer that shows various communities, geographic response strategies from the Department of Environmental Conservation, and then Alaska maritime limits and boundaries. So that's what these various lines are showing as kind of the geographic boundaries in the ocean. And we also have a spill trajectory here loaded. And this is the default view when you come into the Bering Sea Response Teaching Tool. And if we were to use this scrubber down here, this timeline, we could actually see this spill trajectory propagate out into the water column. So if I begin to move this, I can see these particles move and being driven by real ocean currents and real wind weather that we acquired from the Navy HICOM model and the NCEP WRF model. So this is a default view of the teaching tool, but we can remove and add layers as needed. So here I'm going to start removing some of these. I'll remove this community database, geographic response, the boundaries, and we'll leave this spill trajectory module up here running. And we've developed 16 different spill trajectories, or excuse me, 20 different spill trajectories. We have 5 locations and then 4 different spills at each one of these locations. So let's go to the Kotzebue spill trajectory scenario. So we just loaded this, and you can see that the spill is initializing in the center right here. And if we begin to run or scrub this, we can see how these, and you notice here that this is a dynamic environment, that initially these oil spill particles are traveling westward, and then conditions change either in the ocean or in the wind or weather, and these begin to move in a different direction. What we can do here is we can add a variety of different data layers on top to provide more context. So we received a subsistence harvest effort data set from the Northwest Arctic Bureau that shows subsistence use trends over space and time and across subsistence resources. So let's add that data layer and interact with it a little bit to get an understanding of how integrating 2 different types of data is important during a spill response. So if I go up here to the search and I type in Northwest Arctic Bureau, I see there's this Northwest Arctic Bureau subsistence search areas. I can add that to the map. And we've built this hexagon honeycomb representation of subsistence harvest efforts. And if I roll over these cells, I'll actually get analytics out that show what species and what activities are occurring in these areas. And if I click on one of these cells, and just for interpretation, cells that are red are seeing increased use of subsistence activities. So if I were to click on one of these cells, I can actually build a time series that shows me in that cell who is hunting for what and in what relative effort. So we see that in the fall, in that cell is the highest period of subsistence use, and caribou is the #1 species. But in the summer is actually the lowest, and so in that cell, people are actually hunting for berries and fishing for pike. But in the fall, everyone shifts over to caribou. We can apply a variety of different filters here to understand these various subsistence resources too. So for instance, if we wanted to know specifically where marine mammals were being hunted for, we could turn off the filter and apply just the marine mammal filter. So this is showing the heat map footprint of marine mammal activities in the Northwest Arctic Burrow. And this is kind of the hot spot. You can see here that during, that relatively, seal is the #1 species in this cell, and this is the hottest area of subsistence harvest use. Now, we can run these spill trajectories, so I can turn this guy off. Oh, whoops, go back to the portal. Let's take a second. Load this spill, here it is. I can hide this, so I can toggle this layer on and off, and you can see how that spill begins to propagate. Oops, I think there's a little bit of a bug. Sorry guys, for a second here. And then we can turn back on the subsistence harvest layer. Other types of layers that we could add here would be, I referred to the NOAA Shore Zone program. So let's add some shore zone imagery. If I can spell shore zone correctly. So now I've added in this shore zone imagery data layer, and we can see where does this oil strike the edges of the beach. And then we can access high definition video imagery and still images for these areas. Take a second. So you can barely see this, but what's actually happening here is we're flying the coast, and this little dot is tracking the location which is referenced in this high definition video imagery. So there's a variety of other things that we could do and integrate other types of data. Let's go back to the catalog and look at some Arctic marine species. Oh, whoops. Marine synthesis. This is the suite of data layers that were developed by Audubon for the Arctic marine synthesis, and they describe a whole range of important subsistence species and also just ecologically important species. So you have everything from seabirds to marine mammals to whales, fulmars, crab, saffron cod, ring seal, and shows right now we're looking at polar bear distribution through the seasons and their habitat utilization and kind of densities through these periods. And this data can also be added to the portal, along with a variety of other things. Zoom out. Sure. Yeah. We also have human use data. For instance, like shipping AIS information. So if we go back to the catalog here, and we find some of this AIS vessel tracking data, add this to the portal, load the portal. These are showing some general trends of AIS vessel traffic, showing peaks in the months of July. And this has been analyzed from AIS data provided by the Alaska Marine Exchange. So there are a whole slew of potential use cases in terms of integrating these data for both ecological purposes, spill response, understanding how spill responders utilize a variety of different information, including these spill trajectories, to actually execute a spill response. And this tool is not to serve as a specific application for spill responders. It's really built to elucidate what are the underlying protocols and procedures and information sources that are utilized to correctly execute an emergency response. What I would like everyone on this call to do is to give the Bering Sea Response Teaching Tool a test drive and interact with it. I'm pretty good at running the tool, so I make it look very easy, but it is a little bit complicated. But we're trying our best to make it accessible by a broad range of users. And what would be really great is if everyone notices, there's this little tab here on the right that says feedback. This is the #1 way to get information back to us and folks at Defenders of Wildlife so that we can act on these recommendations. Or if there's additional data that you would like to see integrated here, we certainly would like to know about that. And using the feedback feature is definitely the best way to track and acquire that information.
So I'm going to just ask Rob to go ahead and pull up the scenario page under our catalog so that you can get a good sense of the various types of scenarios we put together. Now, these are not real spills. These are not spills that have occurred, but we have some really good detailed information for those of you who might be interested in. So we have a theoretical barge, right? You could read some of that text there. We have 5 different scenarios on the right-hand side, as you see scenario 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so you pull those up and you get the kind of context. You get the idea of what was occurring that day, what type of vessel it was, what type of products might have entered the environment. And just keep in mind, too, the model, the data that we are using does not necessarily show the type of product that has entered the environment. So we know that these are, different products will react differently to weathering and changes. But recognizing that most often the contaminants are on the surface, and that they are directed by wind and ocean currents, that these are good ideas, good examples to discuss oil spill and how we would be prepared for that. And I believe all of these scenarios are a 96-hour period, to just kind of give some sense of what would happen over time, so you could see kind of what at day one, what would we expect to do, where should we set up our response structure. And so just to kind of think about how that might change, or how a community or a region might prepare to minimize the amount of contaminant entering in the environment. So we have this here, and also take a time, like Rob said, we really invite you all to go and use the tool and become familiar with it. Every single data set that's in here has these descriptions of how they collected the data, how it's integrated in here, and it's important for users to know that. We also have a series of screencast videos that we're building, and what those are just simple recordings of how to use this tool, how to access the tool, how to add different layers to the tool. And when I come out to do village travel this coming year, that's what I'll be sharing is some of these videos, and also discussing how we can better prepare as a region, as a community, identifying some of those key individuals who might be most helpful in a response situation. Now, another thing I want to mention is this tool needs internet connection. And we understand that that's a big challenge for a lot of the communities. And so part of when I do these village trips, I would like to have them, to open this up and to see and to provide feedback back to Rob, back to our team here, Defenders, and see how we can make that better. So part of these screencasts are a way to show the tool without necessarily having always access to the internet. And so all those will be made available. We're still finishing up a couple of the screencasts, and we have a few of them done now, and we will make them public and available to the public. So with that, I just want to double check with Allison and see if she has anything else to add. Okay, no. And then Rob, is there anything else you'd like to kind of go over a little bit more of the data?
No, I mean, I would love to hear if there's any questions from participants. I did a really brief, we have, I think collectively we have over 200 independent data layers here that are organized into 40 modules. So there's a lot of information here. And if people on the call bring up a data layer that they would be interested in seeing that I haven't shown, I would love to quickly show that off. But also I would really like to get a little bit of some feedback from participants as to the utility of this.
So another reminder is this is live now, so you could type this into your computer once we're done with this. You can play with it now. It's the BSRTT. You can Google it, and it will come up on Google, and find it that way if you forget or don't have the direct URL. So it's live. Go ahead and play with it. Share with your partners and others who might be interested. And like Rob said, give it a test. So with that, I think what we can do is if you have questions you want to ask over the phone, we could try to figure out how to go about that in a less chaotic manner. Or if you're at a laptop or a computer and you'd like to type your questions into the chat box, we could do it that way. So I'll open it for questions.
Hey, this is Andrew from Ocean Conservancy. I'm wondering if you could talk about how you came up with the different scenarios that you used. And also, I should say this is super impressive and looks really, really interesting.
Hi, thank you for your question. This is Allison speaking. So for the scenarios, we looked back at historical events that may not have resulted in a substance spill, but beached or stranded vessel, and worked off of those events to then say a what if scenario. What if, you know, the hull had been breached and there was some contaminants that got into the ocean? What would that have looked like? How would that response have occurred? And played with it from that viewpoint. So they are theoretical, but they are based off of past scenarios that did not result in oil spill response efforts being put forth. And you can see for each of the scenarios, there are links to either vessel descriptions or links to reports about that event, and giving a little bit of background, setting the stage, trying to make the spill response an option to use as a theoretical tabletop for when we're in the region to talk about all the different levels that goes into responding to a spill.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, this is Sarah Allen with NOAA.
Hey, Sarah.
Hi there. Great presentation and really neat tool. I have played with it a little bit, but there's obviously a lot there to explore. So thanks for putting this together. I do have a question, though, about whether there's any plans or whether anything's been done to integrate this tool with other data portals like Arctic IRMA or like the AU system that are often used for emergency response as common operational pictures or something else.
So this is it's a teaching tool, so it's not necessarily going to be used in a real-life response situation. However, I will let Rob answer how it's similar or different than Arctic IRMA.
Sure, and I can also talk about how we integrate with Arctic IRMA. So several of these data layers we expose through standardized web services. And so we work with Rob Wright and Amy Merton at NOAA to plug these data feeds into IRMA. And then IRMA, of course, is the authoritative emergency response, platform that's used by the federal government, NOAA, U.S. Coast Guard, those types of things. So, for instance, we have like a HIOBOS sea ice concentration forecast that forecasts sea ice concentration and thickness all the way to the end of April. And we receive this file from University of Washington on the 1st of every month. And we've connected that up with Arctic IRMA so that HIOBOS is being hosted through us, but it's you can visualize it and interact with it through IRMA. And this platform, the BSRTT, is built directly on top of AUS. So anything that AUS improves upon, the BSRTT is able to leverage, and vice versa. So as we improve this BSRTT tool, AUS itself is also improved. And one other thing I wanted to say is we're also working with Chris Barker at NOAA, who leads the development of the NOAA spill trajectory tool. And so the work that we've done here to visualize the spill trajectories and run some of these spill trajectories in a more automated way, we're folding back into the NOAA version 2 spill trajectory software that NOAA is developing.
That's very cool. Thanks for all those details. One, maybe you guys have already looked into this, is Arctic IRMA, has sort of an offline version that they've developed specifically so that it can be used in areas where there's not connectivity. And, I wonder if that's something that would work for bringing this tool out to villages that don't have good internet service as well.
I think that's a great idea because I know that Amy Merton spent a long time and a lot of resources to develop that offline capability. And if we can leverage that instead of trying to recreate the wheel, that's a very smart. So I never even considered that. I really appreciate that comment.
Yeah, thanks.
And I just want to follow up real quick. Somebody had just joined, and if you can mute your phone, we're getting a little bit of feedback here. So just go ahead and mute your phone, and then we'll continue on with other questions.
Good morning. This is Robert Turkiana with the Native Village of Wells.
Hi, Robert. Thank you for calling in.
I don't have fast enough internet to see it in the webinar, but have you guys thought about making a simple app? I know a lot. If you ever seen the Leo network app, in apps it keeps some data for a number of time with a smartphone, and I'm just wondering if you guys would create an app version for smartphones. A lot of us in the villages have smartphones, and that's how we kind of keep connectivity with the outside world. I know through social networking also, but I would really consider, if you guys had an app out there, I would definitely utilize that tool. I just wanted to comment that to see if we're going to develop one.
That is a major goal for this next 6-month work plan for the Alaska Ocean Observing System, is to be able to get these interfaces in a more simplified way, but running on smartphones. So the BSRTT will come along with that work. So yes, I would expect in the next 6 months to 9 months that this will be available in a little bit of a different form, a more simple form, but available via smartphone.
Thank you for that question, Robert. I appreciate that. Anyone have any other questions?
Rhonda, this is Amy Holman.
Hello, Amy.
Hi, Rhonda. Put something in chat, but hit return when I was still editing it. Wondered if you'd had any discussions with the regional response team about this being a way to help engage folks in the communities to look at these sub-area plans for spill response, since oftentimes I hear that they're kind of esoteric and people don't quite, it's not easy for people to get excited about looking at them. Something like this might be far more visible, and I wondered if you were already down that path at all.
Oh, thank you for that great question, Amy. I appreciate that. So I actually was able to give this presentation, a slightly modified one, not as great and smooth. We didn't have Rob there, but I gave this presentation to the Alaska Regional Response Team while they came to Nome in September. I also had an opportunity to discuss it with the Northwest Arctic Sub-Area Committee, who is, so for those of you who don't know, the Northwest Arctic Sub-Area has a plan, and it's from Kivalina all the way down south, including St. Lawrence Island, south to St. Michael Stebbins. And so that area has a plan specific to any spill response or sensitive areas or geographic response strategies. And that plan is used by responders to train and be familiar with that specific area. Now, I had an opportunity and worked with Phil Johnson and Jeanette Atlas over there, and got to integrate the actual link to this into the Northwest Arctic Sub-Area Contingency Plan. Right now we're doing updates to that, so I appreciate that question, and that allowed me to kind of follow through with some of the stuff that we have been doing and have done. So yes, the answer is yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Melissa Parks with Pew. I typed a question into the chat box, but I thought I'll just go ahead and ask it on the phone. Is there a data layer that shows the location of various response resources? And if so, is there any way to estimate, how quickly that response could get in the vicinity of a spill or an area where oil's at the shoreline?
That's a great question. So we have, we're pulling up some of the oil spill containers that we have, and it's directly from the ADEC website there, if you can kind of see some of that. And then it shows where there are caches that the state of Alaska has provided to the public for use, recognizing that the public is responsible for replacing those materials if they are used. And so we have one here, 2 containers in Kotzebue and 2 containers in Nome. And so you can click on that, and then you could actually see, Shadow actually also has container equipment in Nome, and they're one of our partners in kind of learning and expanding more the spill response education. So they have a hub location in Nome, and you could kind of see the specs for Shadow and how quick they can get up here. But we also, as far as the time, Shadow would be the oil spill response organization to respond if called upon by the Coast Guard. And so they have a great tour facility here in Anchorage where they're also able to deploy a bunch of equipment and a very quick turnaround, which is really, really impressive. And we've had opportunity to tour their facility and get a really close, in-depth look at what they have available, what's needed. Shadow actually also has a Vessels of Opportunity program that they run out of the Nome area. And that program takes commercial fishermen who are local in that area and who are very knowledgeable of the area, and they train them with Shadow spill response equipment. So if for some reason Shadow is held up here in Anchorage, they can tell a number of their captain and fleet operators, go access the 5 containers of equipment we have and contain that spill. And that's really impressive. So they do that training annually to make sure that they're proficient in that. And we hope to expand that Vessels Opportunity Program throughout the Bering Strait region, but also up into the Kotzebue area. And so there's some more discussion that needs to be had with Shadow and others, but that's definitely a good option. So I appreciate that question as well from you, Melissa, and I hope I answered it all.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yes.
I know that in the sub-area plans there's information for community resources, and I'm curious if you guys have a layer for that, so that if you're out in communities showing people this tool, you give them an idea of maybe how much equipment's available in their community.
That's a great question. So we're going to have Rob here navigate some of the community profile information that's also managed by the state, has a direct link to it. And as far as specific to spill response equipment, I don't think the state keeps a catalog of that, or if it is, how well it's updated. And so you can click here, and it takes you directly to all the specs of what Kivalina, the population of Kivalina, the runway situation. So going back to some of what Amy was asking is, could this be useful in some of the education of sub-area plans? I really do think so. And this is some of the ways you can do it. So this is directly linked to any updates that the state provides in the census. So the unique thing about this is there's very little update that needs to happen from staff internally. They are directly linked to those agencies and entities who are responsible for updating that information. And so keep in mind too, with that said, some of the subsistence use area information is kind of a snapshot in time of where those species have used that habitat, where humans have also used that habitat for subsistence resources and such. Now, and that just goes to show how much more important community, direct access, community engagement, that relationship is in a spill response situation. So again, it's a roundabout way, but yes.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Hey, Rhonda, this is Phil Johnson with Department of the Interior. And,
hello, Phil.
Hi. So, yeah, just maybe less of a question, but more, just kind of to build on what some of the stuff you were saying. And number one, kudos to you guys for, developing such a great teaching tool. I think that's really important, and even for responders, I think there's some important data layers there. So again, the more that you guys integrate with IRMA, Arctic IRMA, that's really good. As far as the sub-area planning, I appreciate the, kind of the shout out about that. And one thing we're trying to do as we update these plans is to try to include some of the new technologies and new links and things. So just wanted to mention that. And I think the other thing that I had on, kind of had on my mind was, as you're going out and talking to the villages and other communities around the region, I think one of the things about with the, since the trajectories don't have that fate component where the oil kind of evaporates and dissipates, it'll just probably be important to make note that depending on the oil type, these plumes or particles may not last as long as they're shown on the teaching tool.
Yeah, so that's a great point to mention. And we actually do hope that our partners in the federal and state agencies travel out with us to help make that statement reality of that, understanding the weathering of these types of contaminants is a little bit above what I'm doing now, but it's definitely something, you're right, it needs to be heard, and I think the communities need to know that, what a good cleanup looks like compared to a not good cleanup, and understanding how the oil is weathered in the environment I think is very critical to that. So yes, thank you so much for that comment. Do you have any other questions or things to say?
Yeah, no, I think that was it. But again, I think the other thing was, so you link to the community information from the state, and that's really good. But as I think one of the other speakers was mentioning, there is a section in the sub-area plan too on those community profiles. So again, if that hasn't been linked in yet, just like there's a sensitive area section, that those profiles, could also be linked in potentially into your system if they're not already. And that comes straight out of the sub-area plan.
Yes, and I thank you for bringing that up as well. So the community profiles that Phil is referencing are a 2-page, real brief kind of description of the community, the resources, the city, the organization structure, points of contacts, and things like that. And so those are very helpful. And we figured too, recognizing that the sub-areas are updated every 5 years, we thought it best that we directly link to the state website as however they update their things. So we appreciate that comment. And I think we could do is maybe provide a direct link or a URL to the actual sub-area contingency plan in this teaching tool. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you, Phil. Any other questions? Okay, if there aren't any other questions, then, I think Aaron Poe here, so let's double check. All right, thank you. If there aren't any other questions, we'll go ahead and ask you all to log on to the Bering Strait Response Teaching Tool and make yourself familiar with it and provide any feedback. And just like Rob had mentioned, the feedback loop not only hits Rob and his team here at Axiom, but it also hits us here at Defenders as well. So if there's some other partnering or other opportunities that you might be aware of and think that this might be of other additional benefit to partners or to any other efforts going on, please let us know. With that, thank you all so much for calling in and participating, and I'll pass the mic to Allison for her thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time.
All right. Have a great day. Thank you.